of couch co-op. Couch co-op. It is always a big occasion, the top couch co-op and split screen games, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 and Game Pass of the entire year for 2022. I like doing it, I always put it in the last quarter, so I've kind of cheekily put Rubber Bandits in as a honorary number 11 because it came out of the back end of 2021, didn't get it on the previous list. It sort of sat in no man's land, and it's an incredible game, better than Gang Beasts as far as I'm concerned. Really cool heist mode, and they've just put excellent free bit of Halloween DLC in, which is totally worth looking at if you've had this sitting on your hard drive for a while. Some new content there. And talking of new content, Cuphead, the most incredible couch co-op platform game and one of the hardest, got some DLC this year. That was a big move. We haven't seen anything from the brothers for half a decade, and we got some really cool new levels, excellent looking bosses, great themes on all of it. It's not free DLC, but it's not extortionately priced, and there's a whole new map which is very cool. This isn't tack on content, this is like a whole new island with other weapons available and power-ups in the shop, so new songs as well, and learning the bosses, learning their patterns, mapping out how they work is kind of a huge area for this game, and so getting new levels on that front is so welcome. We have started the list, and this is number 10, and it is quite low because it's DLC. Don't think it's scored low against the games coming up because of the quality of base game. No way. This is won loads of lists. Cuphead's up there with the top indie games available, full stop, on all systems. Got Unsighted up next, a game that took me completely by surprise, got to it on Game Pass, available on most systems and consoles. This is a really good looking, I'm going to say hyper-light drifter clone, because that's also a two-player role-playing game. This is based on a quite open world map and questing system, and it took me back because of its size, how fluid the combat is, and how quite detailed the parry mechanic is, and this works really well with two people. The art style's a little bit gratuitous, and some of the text is a bit lengthy, but it's very cool when you get elbow deep in a lot of these enemies, shouting at your couch co-op buddy, pulling out specials and parrying bullets. It's a load of fun. Depth is very important with a couch co-op game, especially a role-playing or action RPG game like this. NPCs having huge dialogue trees and going into your equipment and upgrading everything, bolting it all on, getting really involved in improving what you're wearing and what you're using as a weapon. I love it. It's got loads to give back. The one player is also totally worth looking at. It's not a compulsory local co-op game. Really love the single player offline material with it. Spiderheck is the new go-to party game for 2022, both on a versus level, local, and on a cooperative level with the Wave system. So much content for the gigabyte on this game. It is a stunner, and it still sits with me really strong on my gaming calendar because it's very pick up and play. People get their heads around what it's trying to get across as a message, and fighting each other as these spiders with that Bionic Commando web ability is so much fun. Designing an innovative traversal scheme is one thing, but making a level to utilize that is another, and nails it so well, particularly with the versus arenas and using the gravity against the other player or getting to a particular weapon. It's got like a suck-in ability if you're near an item, so there can be all kinds of rivalry coming up from people rushing towards particular weapons or using the ground as something to pull the other player into. It's got a really slick design and UI. There's never any downtime with the game. Even in lobbies, if you're selecting a game type, you've still got loads to do. And remember, 4-player is the way forward with this absolute chaos, and the levels really cater for it as well. Loads of gaps and spaces to find. It's also got quite an addictive cosmetic unlock system and a sort of roguelike tiered level where you keep going, things get harder and harder, and you end up getting your head around exactly how these controls work. Hours and hours of fun. Also offline and single player content is totally worth looking at as well. Moto GP22 was the only good split screen racing sim we had this year. Gran Turismo 7, I'm looking you square in the eye. I've also got to patronisingly mansplain something to you all now as well, because I know some of you might have switched off. As soon as you saw those 2 wheels, you're like, no, I'm out. Motorcycle games, no thank you. Here's my point, and I want you to watch this clip quite closely. The motorcycle is wheeling on the entrance here, so it's on its back wheel, and this is a braking zone. So applying one of the 2 braking options that you've got is going to rock the vehicle onto its front or both wheels. But incidentally, I've foreshadowed it, the back wheel lifts off. Now, I've been quite vicious on too much scrubbing off with the speed, and that has caused the bike to squirm around. This is half speed, and you can see that it's starting to shudder left and right. Okay, all this has happened in the space of about 8 meters. The decision-making process and the buttons that you're using on the pad is far more advanced and in-depth than just stop and go. And when you put all this footage with Chopin, with that given understanding, it's a whole new kettle of fish. Now, having said all that, you might be like, yeah, that is the exact reason I don't like these games. I just want stop and go. I don't want to have to make decisions about where my weight is or whether I've got the right boots on before I go into an Apex. But it's just so much more rewarding. Here's the other thing. No one's that great at this. So the fun in just getting around a course or just staying with the pack is just hilarious. It is so difficult, and watching each other tumble off, or the tension when you do get close and you are literally on a knife's edge going around these corners is like nothing I own. Car simulation games are great, but you don't see that white knuckle excitement that you've seen in the MotoGP games for the last decade. There's been some really good ones. This being on Game Pass and looking as sweet as it does is so worth exploring if you're remotely interested in simulator games or even arcade racers. This is a new room for you to explore, because getting your head around how competitive it is with minor touches on that throttle, that brings me on to the analog aspect of it. Car racing games are great also, but they do have top speed, no speed. You're really using the triggers, you're really feeling for tire vibrations and all of that when you're chasing the other guy who's next to you, who can see you getting close on the other screen. You don't get tension like that in Gran Turismo. This brings me on to the strange devolution point and split screen and couch co-op. I remember playing on my PlayStation 2 Gran Turismo A-Spec. Great split screen racing mode, only 2 cars on track though, and that's still the case now. However, when you finished the race, you got given a replay, and it was a full screen replay. It wasn't split, and because there was only 2 cars on course, whoever was at the front got that camera mode on them. They were in the spotlight, and if you switched over, then it was your car that was getting the focus, and it was amazing to watch how dramatic things got when you were overtaking each other, especially if you had a spicy race. And they should be doing that with newer games. With this, it would just be phenomenal. That replay mode is beautiful, and it's got wet look and rain and weather physics that are very up to date. Sorry to take you through all of that, but this is a must look at if you've got Game Pass. If you are a massive bike freak and you really want to see a simulator and have someone permanently to race around and enjoy all that campaign content, which is available for 2 of you, then I also recommend it. But it's Destroy All Humans 2, the remake. Interesting one this. Huge fan of the original. I think a lot of you might have been. And I had a lot of complaints on the standalone review about the split of the screen. I personally have taken it on the chin because you do get that map, but the other corner is a complete waste. I will give you that. Resident Evil 5, I managed it through the whole campaign and all the mercenaries mode, I kind of switched off to it after a while. That's exactly what happened with this. This game is so huge and distracting that you've barely got time to moan about the screen split, because you've got 60 frames per second, a 1080 performance, and it just pushing lights, bells and whistles in your direction. Spectacular performance on the PlayStation 5 and huge levels to explore. This is the angle with the game. If you don't know, you are an alien that is trying to operate undercover using human disguises to sort of quietly operate around a map. But as always, police get involved, the army get involved, and a gradual descent into chaos is inevitable on a lot of playthroughs. But it's brilliant how it runs, never skips a beat. It does have some strange screens shudder sometimes, but having this amount of moving enemies and characters and non-player characters on screen the whole time is really breathtaking. Playing around with its limits is like my favourite thing. And it also has a photo mode in it, full freeze frame, and you can go and look at all assets, what everyone's wearing, character suits. Really good idea, I think, for a game this beautiful.
He's kind of creepy, but I do love his fine Colombian.
There's two major things that prop it up for me. First of them is rose-tinted nostalgia for the original. I just want to replay the game again, see it all again in this better looking mode. That brings me on to the second point, is its PlayStation 5 performance. It's really pretty, runs incredibly well, vibrant, beautiful HDR. There's nothing to complain about on that front, other than the dodgy screen split. I think this is the first game to come up with an extremely substantial campaign. It's going to last you ages getting everything unlocked and going to all of those different worlds, including Japan, a snowy Russia, and there's also other versus modes put in there. But the main content is the story, finding out what happens to Crypto and unlocking the best weapons in video games. I shit you not, some of them will make you laugh out loud. Little elements of Far Cry and some Thief elements in there with the disguises, or manoeuvring around, masquerading as somebody else, even listening on a sort of Assassin's Creed level to conversations. And then you've got the obvious GTA comparisons with the semi-open world maps, which can be really huge and are full of secrets. Finding out new outfits and finding new weapons and hidden stuff within the maps with someone else locally is half the fun for me. And just listening for the one-liners that the NPCs say or people in the city say, everybody is just written so well, so funny, it will keep you glued. The story is like a farcical, complete nightmare, desecration of just about every public service that are available within cities. There is no holds barred with the insults, the humour, and some of the ridiculous things you can do to everybody. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is next up. It was this year's Streets of Rage, a side-scrolling beat-em-up. And don't get it confused with the Cowabunga collection, which has recently been released, or the Platinum game, which has kind of been discontinued. Grandma might buy you the wrong one for Christmas. Look out. A huge double whammy with this one because it's in a gaming style I love, the 16-bit sort of side-scrolling beat-em-up angle, and of course it's revamped the Ninja Turtle brand really loyally, and some characters and recordings, voice lines, stories, everything is just in the right direction. It's a really good setup. Transformers Devastation is another perfect port of a decent cartoon in that direction.
Teamwork is the way.
Its next accolade is that it boasts up to 6 local co-op on the Switch, 4 on normal consoles, and I enjoy the idea of having more than 2 people on side-scrolling beat-em-up. It does totally work, it's not too hectic. So that was very welcome. The third point is that it's actually a damn good beat 'em up, and the characters have really cool specials that are individual to them. The boss fights in various arenas have great homages to some of the iconic villains from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. Some games just ignore the classics. This didn't. Letting you play as April O'Neil or even Splinter and having these accolades on each of the missions gives it loads of replayability. It's really strict accomplishments, not taking any damage or going for a particular type of enemy, making sure something doesn't run off screen. You're kind of preoccupied if you want to get all achievements. That would be its only minus, is its length. I've heard all manner of complaints about how short it is, and it is a bit, but then again it's an arcade side-scrolling beat-em-up. They're not going to be 20-50 hours long, and it is completely white knuckle the whole time. There's no point in it where you're like, oh, this is getting a bit tiresome. Superb tribute to a great comic and cartoon series. Okay, we're doing Salt and Sacrifice, and this is a sequel to Salt and Sanctuary, a game that was around when the channel first started, and also a brilliant couch co-op 2-player campaign. And this is like a Dark Souls 2D, absolutely awesome game model where you're unlocking all kinds of doors, ladders, weapons, abilities. You get to build a class and fight some quite harrowing enemies, very difficult platforming in sections, but it's a hack and slash, and it is great, very rewarding. Looks really good on the PlayStation 5 as well. You have a hub system like you would in a lot of campaign games, and you get to go to different areas, kill the boss, come back. There's a roguelike element to it where you can't just continue after dying. There is a lot of punishment on that, and you lose all your souls, a la Dark Souls, and it's cool to see your weapons and your armor, even magic, and the dodge roll come together when you're fighting some of these crazy bosses. Reflections in the ground look really good. Everything has got a fresh look to it. It's quite new, this game, and the original had a very drab color palette. This one's gone for it, and I like the idea of a lot of magic being bright, and of course a lot of the attacks having electrical light coming off them. I will say that the game is quite hard, and it doesn't adhere to a tiered system on the 2D setup. So it's not like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where you can go up and down in lanes. You are flat facing a lot of the enemies, which means you've got to get your head around the parry system, which is very deep, and jumping, slamming stuff down from above, and using all of your items and upgrades. The upgrade tree is massive. This game is deeper than the first one, so if you're remotely a fan of Salt and Sanctuary, Sacrifice is the way forward. It does nail the feeling of adventure quite well. You do get to discover secret areas, secret bosses even, and find like really cool rare items. There's no real re-roll, so you can just concentrate on something that you're finding particularly difficult, go back, do a bit of grinding, and again, the single player campaign is totally worth looking at. All of these games have got great single player content. I think that's so important with owning loads of couch co-op games, is that are they even worth going to if there's no one about? This one not available on Game Pass. I own this on the PlayStation 5, and there is blatant enhancements for it. It's kind of a AA game. It is indie, so it doesn't cost massive amounts of money, but I would recommend, if this is the first time you've clapped eyes on this series, to really consider the original as well. Both of them are totally worth looking at, and both of them have awesome local co-op campaigns in them. It's time for a game called Young Souls, which, applicably enough, is one of the newest games on the list. I very much enjoy this. Back to Unsighted, this is an identical game model, an open world-ish action role-playing game where you visit NPCs, get given quests, go to different areas, tiered difficulty, and get to enjoy a wealth of pickups, loot, cool new weapons, cool new appearances, and it's a hack and slash, and we've got that tiered system, so not the 2D. You've got a whole lane to work with, which really boosts the combat. The combat's brilliant with a really workable parry that's got quite a big window, there's slowdown, there's bright colours and lights. It's not hugely complicated either, so the younger ones are going to get into it. There's very few flaws with Young Souls because of how new it is. It's got all these quite addictive little trinkety roguelike aspects to it, and it's got a very user-friendly front end where you're introduced to the village and the setup. It's got some quite dramatic changes when things start opening up, and working out new abilities and being able to just slot in a new sword that you found that behaves differently, looks different, and has a special that's boosted. That sort of thing really pulls me through these co-op adventure games, and this one, it's just got it all. There's quite a big emphasis on unique boss design and using a particular weapon or power to counter it. That one will be brick wall if you're not taking on board the element system within it, or even how that parry system works against the throw mechanic. It also doesn't shield away the other character from you when you play it on single player. So it's a little bit like Overcooked or something like that, where you can switch out at one button touch, even Marvel vs. Capcom, and on the swap you can do a power or get something to even do a blast area effect when you bring the new person in. Very cool stuff. I would say it's better than Unsighted because it doesn't take itself too seriously. There's quite a lot of fourth wall breaking and references to like nerd culture, and it's just a bit more dramatic looking, runs a bit better, smoother as well. I do like its loot system and reward system with all of the equipment. Having like 9 slots against your character just really gives a reason to come back to it and start developing things more. Bit of a shame it's not 4-player, but the story does sort of revolve around the 2 characters as a model. And of course you've got stuff like Dragon's Crown if you do want to go for that full-blown 4-player hectic side-scrolling smash and bash. Talking of smashing and bashing, it's time for Tiny Tina's Wonderland, and we aren't at number 1. There's one more game to come. This is the strongest and best looking split screen first person shooter available on the market. Does it pit Borderlands 3 in areas? It does. Because it's more of a fantasy vibe, it might be applicable to people who have got that scratch to itch. The game is completely off the hook and runs at 60 frames per second with that split in, and you get the choice of vertical or horizontal. I always praise Gearbox and 2K for their Borderlands split screen experiences, and I hope that they keep it going. We've got some new Borderlands 3 content coming up at the end of this month, so I'll be whacking that on the channel as soon as it's available. Is this game better than Borderlands 3? You'll have to get the answer to that in my top co-op local campaigns video, but it's a very strong contender and it's number 2 on the list for damn good reason. Full-blown campaign, absolute AAA production on everything. The loot in this series is world famous, and some of the enemies and their dialogue is absolutely stand out, and the environments, the spooky forest, the mushroom kingdom, the castles, it's beautiful looking in all the right areas. It's also got this DRM thing going on, and it's pushing quite a lot of content to you for free, which is a plus, but the end game is a little bit shifty, and so if you're into getting a campaign and finishing it and not having to go back because there's certain new things that keep dropping in, then you might want to go to Borderlands 3. But if you're up to almost a live service, this is the way forward. One of the major attractions for me with this game against Borderlands 3, however, is the magic and the slot with the melee weapon. It's so cool to get like a new double-sided axe or have something that's got an element attached to it, because when you're swinging around in close quarters, it's very chunky, feels very different. And the effects of some of the magic with flying sheep and beautiful almost fireworks like cascades as you brutalize everybody on screen is exactly what you own a Borderlands game for. By God, do you get it in droves with Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So this is exciting. We are at number 1 and it is Nobody Saves the World, and it's only the second time an indie game has got to the top of one of these lists. The first time it was Children of Morta, both action ARPGs, but this one's got a different angle of having an almost unlimited amount of characters to unlock. They're not unlimited, but you've got so many it feels like Garbage Pail Kids or something. It's just so great turning a corner in the game and opening up a horse or a giant rat or a magician or a bodybuilder. There's just so many laughs to be had with just using the effects of the characters that you've opened, and it looks spectacular, runs brilliantly. It's a great top-down action RPG this. One of the more natural feeling ARPGs out there as well, with very snappy controls, and the specials on the hotkeys, they feel all in the right place, and opening up new ones, the way they benefit the combat or your maneuverability or even the elements or ailments that they put on the enemies is really satisfying seeing it come to fruition. It's detailed accolade system as well with developing each character. The more you use, the more you open up. It's a system I really like it. If you find someone that you gel with, then just opening their badassery meter to the maximum is something that's so worth grinding for. And this game does offer a little bit of grinding, but it does have that excellent campaign system with a questing map that reminds me of Super Mario 3, and a difficulty and enemy design on these dungeons that so keeps me coming back. So its backstory is that it's from the people that made Guacamelee 1 and 2, which are very famous games on my channel and some of the best beat-em-up side-scrolling puzzlers out there. When they came out with this, it didn't have couch co-op in it, and I reviewed it as a standalone game on the channel, link in description, and I was like, yeah, it's cool, but man, why did they do us like that with getting rid of their local co-op? Because traditionally they'd always come out with great local co-op games, and sure enough our prayers were answered. I got up one morning and it was full blown put in as an update, and it's just been a rip-roaring ride from there on in. Having the main selling point as the characters offers an opportunity to explore build to a certain extent, and switching out to each character can be done in real time, and that's an angle I think is so limitless with its options, because some characters really do specialise in range, others are completely close quarters, and the magician or the horse, which has got incredibly strong features, just needs to have a time and a place for its best utilization. And so that gets the old noggin going. When you come up against a brick wall, you start thinking about which characters are going to solve this problem. That brings you on to almost like deck builder territory, where you're looking at your roster and you're working out who to maybe strengthen by taking them to a slightly easier dungeon, and just seeing the tree and the unlocks and how they change and seeing a new hotkey given to you is a complete dopamine delivery system. And then having that with someone else next to you who's also looking to open up characters and gets different things going, that's the sweet spot for local co-op, I think, when you're both invested in a goal that allows you to operate separately with all of your spend and upgrades, but still get involved with a huge roster of characters that doesn't alter or hinder the other player at all. So that's us all squared up till this time next year. God only knows what's going to be going on by the time I put the new list together. We might even be on the PlayStation 5 Pro, or it might just be VR in the metaverse.